Have you ever wondered what would happen if, in your final moments, instead of peace, you were dragged into fire? Not metaphorical fire. Not guilt. Not some bad dream. I'm talking about real, suffocating flames. Agonizing screams. And mirrors. Yes, mirrors, that showed me everything I had tried to hide from the world. And from myself. They say your life flashes before your eyes when you die. But mine didn't flash. It played over and over, like a scene I couldn't escape. I was conscious, but paralyzed. And what I saw broke me. My own reflection stood in front of me. Not as I appeared on earth, but how I had become inside. Hollow, tormented, addicted to things I swore were harmless. I had died. And somehow, I was still watching myself. The room was dark, but the mirrors, there were dozens, glowed faintly, illuminating every crack of the twisted place I was in. The heat was unbearable. I could hear crying. No, sobbing. But it wasn't someone else. It was me. My soul crying out from the inside. And in that moment, I realized, this wasn't punishment from a cruel God. This was the consequence of everything I had chosen. I had justified it all. Everyone does it. It's just natural. At least I'm not hurting anyone. That's what I told myself every time I fell into masturbation, every time I gave in to lust, every time I escaped into the false comfort of secret pleasure. But here in this place, there was no room for excuses. No one to impress. No screen to hide behind. Just me. And the reflection of a soul that had wasted itself. Have you ever felt like something you couldn't control was quietly destroying you? That's how it starts. Slowly. Secretly. Harmless in the beginning. Even pleasurable. But sin has a voice, and once it finds its way into your heart, it whispers, just one more time. And before you know it, you're trapped. Stay with me until the end, because what I saw next may sound like a scene from a horror movie, but it was all too real. I wasn't alone in this place. The mirrors began to shift, and I saw them. Others, men and women, some young, some old, all locked in torment. Not because they were worse than anyone else, but because, like me, they never thought it would lead here. There was a woman, her eyes lifeless, her arms wrapped around herself as shadows whispered lies she once believed. There was a man, his hands bleeding from pounding the same mirror I stood before, screaming. I didn't know. No one told me it was this serious. But deep down, we did know. We always knew. We just ignored it. What shocked me most wasn't the pain. It wasn't the demons. It was the silence of God. The cold, agonizing realization that grace had been available until it wasn't. That repentance had a window, and I had slammed it shut over and over again with each harmless indulgence. And now, in this place where time didn't seem to exist, I would do anything just to go back. Just to feel guilt again, because guilt meant I still had a chance. What you're about to hear next might be the most terrifying moment of all. Because just when I thought I had seen the worst of it, one of the mirrors changed, revealing someone I knew. Someone I never imagined would be here. Someone who was still alive. It was my best friend from college. The one who always made jokes about religion, who said hell was a fairy tale. I hadn't seen him in years. But there he was, in the mirror, screaming. Not because he was dead, but because something in his soul had already begun to rot. And suddenly, I understood. Hell isn't just a place you go when you die. Sometimes, it starts before that. When you shut your ears to truth. When you stop listening to the warnings that come wrapped in guilt and silence. That's why I'm telling you this. Not to scare you for the sake of fear, but because I wish someone had told me this when I still had time to change. If this story, this place I've seen, makes sense to you, if it stirred something inside you, leave a comment below. Tell me what part spoke to you most. Maybe it reminded you of someone. Maybe it reminded you of yourself. I believe your words can not only help you process what you're feeling, but also reach someone else who's silently going through the same battle. And if you haven't liked this video yet, please do. Not for the algorithm, but so this message doesn't get buried. so that more people, people who need to hear it, can find their way to truth. Every like, every comment, every subscription is not just a number. It's part of something bigger. So, thank you for being here, for listening with your heart, for caring about something that this world wants you to ignore. But don't go just yet, because what I saw next was worse than fire. It was regret. And the face behind the next mirror? It was a pastor. And the sin that dragged him here was one he thought no one would ever find out. Let me tell you what happened to him. It's hard to explain what it feels like to stand in the presence of eternal consequence. You don't process it the way you would on Earth. Down there, in that suffocating stillness, time doesn't pass. It crushes you. And as those mirrors kept shifting, showing me not just myself but the lives of others who had ended up in this same torment, I began to understand something terrifying. Most of us don't fall into hell. We walk there slowly, step by step, choice by choice. One of the first faces I saw in the glass was a girl, probably in her early 20s. Her name echoed in the air. Rachel. She had grown up in a normal home. Church on Sundays. Smiles in family photos. But behind her bedroom door, it was another world. That's where her secret life began. It started with curiosity, clicking a video late at night, then another and another. Porn became her medicine for loneliness, a hidden ritual that brought a flood of shame followed by the familiar thought, I'll stop tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Her addiction grew with her. Even when she had a boyfriend, it didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. She needed more stimulation, more intensity, until no human touch could compare. What she didn't know was that every click carved something out of her soul. In hell, her eyes were hollow, but her hands were chained, each link etched with the title of a video she had watched. The demons didn't touch her. They didn't have to. They just played the scenes over and over, whispering the same lies she used to believe. You're not hurting anyone. You're just lonely. This is normal. Then came Marco. His story punched me in the gut because he was someone I might have followed online. Charismatic. Handsome. Always traveling. Always surrounded by women. He had built a digital empire around his body. Posting photos, selling content, teaching others how to own their sexual energy. But in hell, that empire had collapsed. And now, the followers he had once entertained were shadows pulling at his skin, screaming for more. They weren't fans. They were accusers. Every post had been a transaction, and now the cost was due. He tried to reason with the mirror. I didn't force anyone to sin. They chose to watch. But the mirror answered with silence. It simply showed the DMs he had received, the ones he ignored. You made me fall. I lost my marriage because of you. Your videos woke something in me I can't control. Hell doesn't need to scream. It just shows you what you never wanted to face. And then there was the man with the wedding ring. Samuel. A husband. Father of 2. Church every weekend. Family photos full of staged smiles. But Samuel lived a double life. He was addicted to adult webcams. Masturbation had become a ritual before business meetings, after arguments, during quiet moments when no one was watching. Except someone was always watching. In hell, Samuel stood between two images. On one side, his family's living room. Christmas, birthdays, the smiles of children who trusted him. On the other, the cold blue light of a screen, his fingers shaking, heart racing, soul dying. He kept whispering, I loved them. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But the mirror didn't lie. Lust had become his comfort, and now it was his captor. Then I saw a boy, maybe 16 or 17, still wearing a hoodie and earbuds. His name was Elijah. He was the kind of teen who laughed off sermons, rolled his eyes at Bible verses, and said things like, everyone does it. It's just part of growing up. His sin wasn't scandalous. It was normalized. But in hell, there are no normal sins. There's only rebellion and consequence. Elijah tried to scream, but no sound came. His mirror showed the progression: innocent curiosity at first, then hours of scrolling, guilt, shame, secrecy. He never hurt anyone. But he never resisted, either. The mirror kept whispering a phrase over and over: "I thought I had time." Then came someone who once stood behind a pulpit. Pastor James. He had a voice that moved crowds and a presence that inspired confidence. He preached about grace, about love. But he lived in filth. Secret meetings. Flirting disguised as counseling. Late-night texts to women in his church. He knew what he was doing. But he also knew how to cover it. In hell, there was no pulpit. Only a courtroom. And every sermon he ever preached played back like evidence. Words that came from a stained mouth. The demons laughed. Not because he had sinned, but because he had pretended not to. Because he had led others to the cross while hiding a serpent in his pocket. And then came the girl whose name no one remembered. Not even her. All she ever wanted was to be loved. To be seen. Her life on earth had been a cycle of giving her body to men who offered attention, validation, a few minutes of warmth. Each time she hoped this one would be different. Each time she ended emptier than before. In hell, she didn't scream. She just sat there, covering herself with her arms, while shadows walked past her, whispering the same words they had said in hotel rooms, on the streets, in the messages she used to read at 2 a.m. Her body had become her currency, but here it had no value. And her soul, once so desperate for love, had been sold for silence. I saw a man too. He had died at a party. His name was Damien. And he died laughing. In hell, that laugh never stopped. It turned into a twisted echo, a loop of mockery. He used to say things like, "God made me this way," and "Love is love." But in the mirror, love was not what stared back. It was hunger. The faces of the people he used, manipulated, discarded. The parties, the substances, the choices. He had died proud of his freedom. But now, he was chained by it. And then, there was a man who looked just like me. Only older. Broken. Worn down. His name? He didn't speak it. But I knew. He had spent years watching, clicking, swiping. Telling himself he'd change one day. That he was just waiting for the right time. That God understood. He was the one who always said, "At least I'm not hurting anyone." But now, he was hurting. In every sense of the word. And the worst part? He had almost changed. He had heard the warnings. He had felt the guilt. But he silenced it with another video. Another excuse. Another tomorrow. And just when I thought I had seen the depths of suffering, one last figure appeared. He wasn't bound. He wasn't screaming. He was watching me. A demon. Calm. Cold. Calculated. And he leaned in, smiled, and said something I will never forget. "You were easy." That phrase still haunts me. He didn't say, "You were evil." He said, "You were easy." I didn't need to worship Satan. I didn't need to murder. I just needed to drift. To surrender little by little. To choose comfort over conviction. And he watched me do it. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. If any of this pierced your heart, comment below. That makes sense to me. Her name was Rachel, and she was the first face I saw beyond the fire. Not twisted, not monstrous. Just broken. She used to be like so many others, raised in a Christian home, taught right from wrong, warned about sin. But no one warned her about boredom. No one warned her about loneliness, or the subtle ache that crept in during quiet nights. The first time she watched porn, it was curiosity. Just a friend's suggestion during a sleepover. A joke, a dare. But the image stayed. It burned itself into her mind. And what began as just curiosity became a nightly ritual. She said prayers and then opened her browser. She wept at church and then wept again behind a locked door. The spiral tightened. She thought she was the only one, that this was her private shame. But in hell, her secret was carved into the walls. Every video, every title, every whispered name, etched in flame. She didn't scream when I saw her. She just looked at me with a face I'll never forget, one that said, "Why didn't I stop?" Then there was Marco, the influencer. His photos were everywhere when he was alive. Shirtless selfies, late-night parties, tan skin, gym routines. He called it confidence, called it embracing his masculine power. But it was lust, polished and filtered and monetized. He taught thousands how to seduce, how to reclaim sexual energy. His audience admired him, envied him, worshipped him. But in hell, the very people who had once praised him became his tormentors. Their hands clawed at him, not out of hate, but need, desperate, starving, addicted to the lies he sold them. Marco begged for mercy, claimed he didn't force anyone to sin. But the mirrors around him only played his tutorials, over and over, while shadows whispered, "You taught us how to fall." There was no laughter here, only regret. His kingdom had been built on desire, and now he was consumed by it. And then I saw James, Pastor James. He once stood in front of thousands, conferences, megachurch sermons, charismatic, bold, full of grace. But behind the scenes, he was a fraud. Late-night chats with women in the congregation, secret hotel meetups during ministry trips. Always justifying, always smooth with words. "We're both adults. God understands. It's not like I'm abusing anyone." But now, the very scriptures he used to preach were nailed around his neck, burning, heavy. His own voice echoed through the flames, sermons twisted into indictments. He wasn't just guilty of sin. He was guilty of leading others into sin while pretending to be holy. His mask was gone now. Only ashes remained. I walked further and found a girl sitting in silence. She didn't have a name anymore, at least not one she remembered. Her life had been one long search for love. Her father left early. Her mother was too busy. Boys became her escape. First kisses at 13. Losing her virginity in the back seat of a car. Years of letting her body be the price of attention. In her 20s, she called it empowerment. Posted pictures. Sold content. Owning her sexuality, she said. But every post was a cry for love. And no one ever truly answered. In hell, she was surrounded by shadows. Men she had never met, whose faces she couldn't recall, but who remembered her. Their lust had fed on her like parasites. And now, they pulled at her soul, whispering every comment she once laughed at online. She wasn't being punished. She was being claimed. And then, there was me. I saw myself. An addict. Not to drugs. Not to fame. But to comfort. To lust. The kind that wraps around your mind and makes you forget you have a soul. I thought I had time. Always later. One more time. One more click. I convinced myself that grace was endless. That God would understand. And maybe he would have. If I had ever actually repented. But I didn't. I just managed my guilt. Treated my sin like a bad habit instead of a rebellion. That version of me. He was silent. Exhausted. Dead inside. And I realized then. The worst judgment isn't fire. It's clarity. It's knowing what you could have been if you had just turned around. And as I stood in that final room, with all these lives replaying like scenes from a haunted documentary, that's when he appeared. The demon. Not horned. Not hideous. Just calm. Cold. Calculated. He looked me in the eye, and said those words I will never forget. "You were easy." He smiled like someone who'd caught a fish without bait. And I knew what he meant. I didn't need to be tempted with horror. Just comfort. Just convenience. I gave up my soul not with a scream, but with a shrug. That realization burned more than fire ever could. Comment below. That makes sense to me. If you stayed with me all the way through, thank you. I know this wasn't easy to hear, but if it stirred something in you, that means it mattered. I try to bring stories here that most people aren't talking about. Honest, raw, and maybe a little uncomfortable, but necessary. If this helped you see things differently, subscribing is the best way to stay close as we go deeper into these truths together. Drop a comment below saying, "This message was for me," so I know you made it to the end. I read every one of those, and it helps me know we're not just speaking into the void. And if you felt a connection, just tap the like button. Not for the numbers, but because it means you and I saw the same thing. There's a video right next door that continues this conversation in a powerful way. Click on it and come with me there. This channel exists to give voice to stories like mine. Stories no one wants to talk about, but everyone needs to hear. And if you subscribe, you won't just be following a page. You'll be walking with us through the darkest testimonies that carry a flicker of light. A warning. A wake-up call.